Hello and welcome to the What the Finance podcast, where we talk to experts about all things finance. If you get value out of this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss out on any in the future. I hope you enjoy. Erica, thank you so much for joining the podcast to talk about your upcoming book, Crypto Wars, Fake Deaths, Missing Billions, and Industry Disruptions, which is released on the 3rd of July, so a few weeks. Just to start, I wanted to ask about your motivation for writing the book.
The motivation for writing a book, I'd love to say it was some sort of inspired idea. Actually, the publisher, it was their idea. They reached out to me and had the idea for doing a book on crypto scams called Crypto Wars, and reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested. And so why I said yes, I'd never done a book before, so we've got a clock going on in the background. I'd never written a book before. I'd never done anything like that before. I'd never written actually anything since uni. And even then I found the dissertation an awfully difficult, slow and painstaking thing to do. So I think I just thought, it's something I've never done before. It's an interesting, fun subject, and naively, how hard can it be and how much time can it take up? And then you realize, once you sort of commit to it and get started, that it actually totally takes over your life for an entire year, and how much research is needed and how long it does take to write these things.
Yeah, definitely. Because reading the book, you definitely went into quite a lot of depth of the major scams and sort of the major hacks of the crypto world, basically the past 10 years. So as explained in the title, you sort of talk about the most controversial parts of crypto's history. Why do you think crypto has been so susceptible to scams?
I think, like any sort of new emerging technology, you've always got opportunists, and you had the same in the sort of the dot-com era, and you've had the same, in throughout history. And I think partly it's just because it's a new exciting technology. It's sort of shiny new toy syndrome, which attracts opportunists. But I think that the problem with crypto, and why it's attracted so many scams, is because of the volatility and because of the excitement, and because of, partly because of the volatility, but partly because it is actually, if you look at Bitcoin and the core cryptocurrencies and the concept of what they're doing, it's absolutely incredible and game changing. And so people who got in early did do well out of crypto, and have done well out of crypto, and with the volatility, and so it attracts a lot of people who have done well out of it. So you've not only got a new technology, but you've got a new technology that at various times has grown phenomenally in value, and has made returns that simply have never been seen before. So that does attract opportunists, that does attract people who want to do well out of it, and that does attract organized crime. So I think why there's been so many scams in crypto, partly because it's a sort of a new technology that is complicated, that people don't understand. So it really is easy to sort of scam and to confuse people, just because it's so sort of misunderstood, but also because the value gains have been so huge that's dragged everybody to it who wants to sort of make their own returns from it. And they promise, well, you'll get these returns, and returns which are totally unsustainable. And it's easy to look at them and go, well, that can only be a scam, because there's no way you can guarantee XYZ returns. And yes, they are scams, but the problem is that those same returns have been made legitimately by other people. So it's very, I think it's just a sort of such a hype fueled space.
Yeah, and I think it's what you say in the book as well. It's a lot of the people who get in early, be it for the scam or for all the other things, they're the ones who really make the money, even if they haven't created it. Yeah,
totally. And what it has been predominant with a lot of the crypto scams is the biggest ones use this structure called multi-level marketing, and it's a very, it's legally grey. It's still remarkably and inexplicably legal. And most people who know anything about multi-level marketing don't understand why it's legal, and it's one of these sort of pyramid shaped marketing structures where those who get in early do very well out of it, and you get rewarded for everybody that you bring in, and if they bring people in, you get rewarded, and so forth. So people at the top of the pyramid do very, very well, and I think traditionally in multi-level marketing, about 98 or 99% of people lose money, but the 1% at the top of the pyramid do well. And what happened in sort of some of the bigger crypto scams, you had these really experienced multi-level marketing sort of networks and people go from scam to scam to scam, taking their teams with them in a really sophisticated sort of structure. And they just knew exactly what to do and how to sweep people up and how to persuade people and how to do marketing and how to get everyone excited. And then what happens with these structures is not just them and the scam sort of selling the scam, but they'll get ordinary people to believe in it. And then it's ordinary people selling the scam to their friends and their colleagues and their families and so forth, because they've bought into it and they believe it. And, you know, the scams pay out initially. So they've bought into it and often seen good returns. So as far as they know, they're selling something that's good to their friends and family and making money from selling it on. So, you know, they've just become so utterly pervasive and almost hard to stop. And even after some of them get sort of stopped by law enforcement, there's still people selling them.
Yeah, and I found that interesting how you talk about like networks, they sort of bring their networks of salespeople into all those different sort of products. And I think the interesting thing that you say is that it's legal if you sell a product, but the issue with crypto is there's not really, you know, you can't say there's anything really behind it that's actually supporting it.
That's the thing. They made up that they were selling a product, and, you know, effectively they were just selling thin air. But they made up that they were selling an educational courses or access to mining equipment, or that they were selling something to have a sort of a facade for people to promote the scam. And of course, they were really just appealing to people's desire to get rich quick without putting in the effort.
Yeah, and I think it's what you mentioned in the book. It's sort of, they're just Ponzi schemes basically. So the money that comes in pays off the people who've recruited them to start with, and then from there, once the money sort of runs dry, they basically just take the money and run.
But basically, you know, I always get asked, why do so many people fall for these scams? And one has to really remember that the bigger scams are run by organized crime. They have huge budgets and they have access to the best people. So they employ the best people in marketing, the best people in promotion, the best people in sort of in psychology, the best people in all of these things. So they have these incredible looking websites sometimes, and they make all of these claims. And the thing is, because they're scams, they don't really care what they're saying. So they'll say that they've got these partnerships with Visa and MasterCard, or with banks, or with regulators, or with law enforcement, or that they've got so and such celebrity or influencer advising them or part of their team and so forth. So they make out to be very good and to have these good partnerships with companies that people know, and to have as customers companies that people know. And because they have no sort of qualms if they get stopped. So for ordinary people looking into them, it is easy to see why people would fall for those, because the claims really are very good.
Yeah, and I think the issue is, especially if you're sort of recruited by a family member or a friend, someone you trust, then you're a lot more likely to sort of believe what they're saying than potentially someone else. And I think that's
and especially because initially they get paid out.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's some people that sort of go from scam to scam, just try and get in early enough to get paid out. But I think it's really, if there are any claims that sort of are even too good to be true, just have a real good look at it.
Yeah, definitely. And that links to my next question. So what would you say are sort of the big red flags people should watch out for if they're looking to back a project?
I mean, the sort of the biggest red flag, the main thing that is used by so many of these scams, is they will promise or guarantee set returns. You know, and they're often high returns, you know, several percent a day in returns. And I mean, A, that's illegal. B, it's impossible. And if you sort of go back sort of out of that a little bit to think a bit more rationally, you've got banks, and you've got hedge funds and traders who, you know, you've got these companies who have access to unlimited money and can hire the best traders in the world and the best software and the best trading bots and then algorithms and all of that, and they can't guarantee returns. And there's no bank or hedge fund in the world that has always got good returns, that's always done well. That they simply can't do that. And yes, there's some that do better than others, and yes, there's some that tend to do well, but there's no legal entity that can promise or guarantee set returns at that level. And then the question is, if you're looking at these sort of often unknown startups or unknown companies making these promises, saying they've got this trading bot, or they've got this mining software, or they've got this new cryptocurrency that's going to make you lots of money, how is that possible? And people get sort of sidetracked from, I think, from what is actually realistic by wanting to believe the claims.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's something that you sort of mentioned, that some of them, if it was this good, and some of them use the example of like a algorithm or something that trades, or it might trade crypto, or something that's arbitrage as crypto. If it were that good, they would keep it to themselves. So I think you said one of them, it was after 3 years you would be worth like it was like 136 trillion.
It was a craze. It was one. It's because they do this sort of compound interest thing, whereas they don't want you to cash out, of course. So if you don't cash out but you keep reinvesting your money, it was after 5 years or something, it would be a multiple of times richer than Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, who was then the richest person on earth. And it is just not possible. But it's easy, I suppose, to appeal to people's vulnerabilities and to appeal to people who want to just make a little bit extra money.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one interesting thing was, as well, is a lot of these sort of, they say they're on the blockchain and they have a crypto, but they're not actually registered on exchanges. They do it through their own website, and then from there you actually have to cash out from their own website, which is obviously sort of OneCoin. I think that occurred. It ended up that there wasn't actually a blockchain.
Right.
It was just basically a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And is that something that's quite common for these scams, but they don't even have the technology behind it?
I think OneCoin is the only one that I know of that didn't have a cryptocurrency at all, that claimed to be. But I think one of the things with crypto scams is they're not all about crypto. So it's easy for people to get worried about crypto, and the scams really aren't actually in some cases related to crypto. They're sort of about the infrastructure or the ecosystem around it. So some of the scams are about mining crypto, for example. So one of the ones we talk about in the book, and they escaped with 722 million in the end, and they made all these claims about having mining equipment, so that people, if you want to get into crypto, you don't have to buy it, you don't have to do all the volatility. And as traditionally people used to mine Bitcoin, but that's hard and it's expensive and it's hot and all of those things. So they say, well, you don't have to worry about getting your own mining equipment. We'll buy it and we'll mine it for you, and you'll get these profits. And of course, they never even had any of the mining equipment. So that's not, it's a scam that's nothing even to do with crypto in some ways, other than just making some vague claims using a few buzzwords.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like there was sort of two types of sort of scams or hacks. One of them was the ones we've talked about, where they're Ponzi schemes, and a lot of them, it seems like they were all about sort of making the founder live this certain lifestyle that they wanted to live, and they would take the money out. And the other one seemed like it was more just, maybe the founders overpromised. They had good sort of intentions at the start, but they just couldn't deliver. Would you say that's sort of correct?
That's, if you look at, say, the ICO era, so the initial coin offering era, which was predominantly 2016 to 2018, is now being determined by law enforcement that I think it's 98% of all projects were either scams or crashed to zero. And so as far as the investor's concerned, if you invest $100 and that goes to zero, or that goes to $1, if it's because it was a scam, or if it's because it was a bad idea and crashed, or if it's because of market circumstances, you're still left with the same $0 from your $100. So it's a grey area. I think in that time there were some that were scams from the start, that were just either Ponzi schemes or were scams or were run by organized crime from the start, where the only intention was to scam people or to exit scam with that money. And then there were others that were really good projects that are still going on today. And then you had some that were, maybe good ideas, but for whatever reason, because of the market or because of regulation or so, just didn't end up working out. And I think from my experience, what would be fair to say is a majority of those didn't start out as scams so much as started out as opportunists. You had this new technology, you had people wanting to get into the space. And the problem with the ICO era is that it was so easy to create a new cryptocurrency out of thin air. It's open source, so you could literally copy some open source code and give it a name, and you'd just give it a name, give it a number of how many coins you wanted to create out of thin air, put a value on these coins that you've created out of thin air, and you could outsource all of this work for very little money. And you could go on one of those sort of freelancer type websites and pay a gig worker not very much money to use a website template that had been created for these to create your own website for it and a logo for it. And in some cases it would cost a couple $100, but then you had your own cryptocurrency, and they'd write these white papers for them saying, well, this is this cryptocurrency which is going to totally and utterly transform whatever industry, selling beauty products on blockchain or selling banana chips or whatever it was. And you had all of these bizarre business ideas that I think the problem was because it was so easy to use the ICO as a funding mechanism. A lot of the business ideas that went into them, had they gone to investors or to funds or to banks or to VCs or even to friends and families, they'd have been laughed out. They'd have been laughed away. Nobody would have taken those concepts seriously. People would have seen that there's just simply isn't a business idea, that it's never going to work, that it could never work. But the problem was, in that time there was so much hype around it that just by putting a few buzzwords of crypto and blockchain onto it, they did raise money. So I think almost a majority of them weren't necessarily scams from the start so much as just utterly hopeless business ideas that in any other time would never have raised any other money, would never have been taken seriously. But they did raise money, and just by using a few buzzwords. And then again, you had people that probably didn't really know what they were doing, that didn't have a very good business idea, that had raised money, and suddenly they're like, well, we've got this money, what do we do with it? Well, either just waste the money not knowing what to do, or just shut up shop and run, because at the time there wasn't seen as having any sort of accountability.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of the issue is what we saw sort of after 2018 crash is a lot of these people had the values in the cryptocurrency that they actually ran. So once it crashed, there was basically, they had hardly any value left. So then they, what was the point of them actually continuing with the project? Do you think that was another potential issue?
I think it was a lot of that, and it was just a combination of factors. Like some of them just never had any value and just got artificially pumped. And some of the founders just decided it was just easier to basically run away with the money. But then, I mean, the other factor is, even after these projects died and sort of ceased trading and founders ran, because of the market and because of the volatility and because it's basically seen as sort of unregulated, it has been very easy for a lot of sort of market manipulation, pump and dumps to happen. So you still get a lot of these projects that, years after they died, are still being sort of pumped, and people are sort of playing with the markets and making money from them, which of course causes other people to lose money from them.
Yeah, definitely. I think one interesting one like that is Dogecoin, which we've seen has had a massive pump. And I think the person who founded it obviously made it as a joke. And I remember reading something where he said that he cashed out, and I think he bought a secondhand car for tens of thousands of dollars, and now if he'd kept it, it'd be worth billions of dollars because it was Elon Musk. Yeah, so we're sort of seeing that, aren't we? More of the meme coins are sort of emerging.
I mean, Doge isn't a scam, but you're right. There are some of these that were. I mean, and that one at least has users and has a loyal fan base. But then you've got all of these sort of copies of Doge and all of these other things, and people are asking, well, because of they're lower than Doge, does that mean they're going to go up in value? It's like, no, not necessarily. They might artificially get pumped up based on hype, but it doesn't mean that there's any value or any use case on them. And what upsets me a little bit with the crypto side, and what's I find got old a while ago, you've got all of this hype and all this focus on the trading and the volatility and blah 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 blah, which is totally missing the use case of crypto. You've got this technology that can be used in micropayments, that can be set in micro amounts, and almost for free, almost instantly, and internationally. So you've got this new technology where you could have transform how content is paid for, transform the remittance industry, ideally make all of the remittance companies go bankrupt because they've just been extorting the billions of the poorest people around the world for years, and they deserve nothing less. You've got this technology that really is changing how payments are made, is changing how the world looks at payments, and it's so much incredible potential. And yet the focus is still, I would argue, too much on how much whatever Shiba Inu Dogecoin meme coin token has been pumped up on that day. And the problem is you've still got celebrities and influencers doing a lot of the pumping and the promotions these days. So of course they get the media time, which only makes it worse.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in the book, you sort of mentioned John McAfee, who's recently passed away, and he was sort of back in 2017, 2018, he was one who really, pumped the coins. And now we're sort of seeing Elon Musk, which is, I think he's doing it for different reasons. He just seems like he likes to have a laugh. Do you think sort of the more mature the market becomes, so hopefully in the next years to come, that these people have less influence on the market?
I think that's certainly true, just because there's more institutions, there's more corporate companies piling into the market, there's more money in it. So the more money in it, the more sort of institutions in it, it will become more stable. And you kind of imagined a few years ago that was just a phase, that you wouldn't see any more of these meme coins, and yet there's thousands more than there ever were now. So yes, I do think it will get more sensible. I think in time, it might, God knows how long it will take the regulators to catch up, and probably the regulators will never catch up, because you've got such a brain drain of the fastest, the most sort of intelligent people moving into the space who can just change things faster than regulation can keep up. So maybe it won't ever catch up, but I do think certainly it will stabilize. You've got, if you look at Bitcoin, you've got so much more global and institutional interest in that one hopes that will stabilize to a degree, and there will be new cryptocurrencies created that have more stability, that have more just use cases as a payment mechanism, that aren't just created to be pumped up and down just for the sake of making a little bit of money out of that.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll go back to the book. So you sort of talk about the famous hack, probably one of the most famous, of MtGox, which obviously occurred throughout 2011, 2014. It was a long process. This seems to revolve more around sort of the company growing above the owner's capabilities, and they just sort of didn't have much idea what to do. Can you explain a little bit more about the issues they experienced? And would you say such a hack is potentially still possible on exchanges today for the companies like Binance or Coinbase?
Yeah, such hacks are still happening. I think that's a reality. Exchanges are still getting hacked. And it's a real problem for them. And you've now got some of the better exchanges are doing whatever they can to have good security measures and have good custody and have insurance and all of that. So, there are measures that the good exchanges can now take to be much more secure. But not every exchange is a good exchange, and not every exchange goes out of its way to have the best security it possibly can. So there are still exchanges with totally lax security that get hacked, and then you still have exchanges. We've seen it a few times recently. We mentioned the Quadriga one, but there was one that was only a month or so ago, a Turkish exchange. I've just momentarily forgotten the name, but the founder managed to get $2.2 billion of people's money into a sort of centralized exchange. And what should ideally have happened in that exchange is, ideally everyone's crypto would be stored separately and ideally offline and securely, so that the founder wasn't able to single-handedly access and control the entire customers' money, but because of how they'd set it up. They'd set it up so that people didn't actually have access to their own crypto, that when people sent crypto to the exchange, they were sending it basically directly to the founder. So the founder accumulated enough money and basically exit scammed and disappeared with $2.2 billion. And that wasn't so much the exchange being hacked as the founder just having single-handed power over it. But it's a similar thing in that it goes to show that there aren't yet sort of, there isn't yet a sort of a compulsory audit or so on crypto exchanges that shows what the problems are. And it's still so easy for these exchanges to get people to send their money there. And people often will think, oh, if they're putting money onto an exchange, it's safer or it's easier. And you hear all these stories with crypto that if you're the one that's responsible for your crypto and then you lose your private keys, then tough luck, you lose your crypto. And there's been so many stories of people who've thrown away their private keys or thrown away their hard drives or thrown away the sort of the hard wallets that their crypto was stored on, and lose millions. I mean, there's a guy in Wales in the UK trying to pay, I think, it's like $50 million or something to the local government for the right to dig up the local rubbish tip to try and find the private key that he's lost in there. So people think, well, if they sold their crypto on exchange, it must be safe, and that isn't necessarily true by any definition of the word. Exchanges do still get hacked, and sometimes it's exchanges that are themselves fraudulent, or at least the founder of the exchange that's themselves fraudulent. So, I mean, MtGox, you asked about. I do feel a little sorry for the guy who ran it. I think he was in over his head, and he started MtGox at a time when crypto was really small and really nascent, and it grew sort of out of control, and interest grew out of control. And what happened there? They got hacked, but the hacker obviously realized that had they taken all of the Bitcoin out in one go, because of the sort of the liquidity in Bitcoin, they wouldn't have been able to sell it all and cash it all out in one go. But if they drained it slowly, then they wouldn't notice. And what happened at MtGox? They hacked the exchange and sort of leaked little bits of Bitcoin out continuously, slowly. And because they always had new Bitcoin coming in, they didn't notice that it was all being leaked out. And one could argue that, yes, they should have had better accounting and better checks and all of these things. And yes, they should have had a lot of things better. But that's how they didn't see it.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite interesting because obviously they had 80% of the actual volume of Bitcoin at that time. So if the person obviously took that all the money out, they wouldn't be able to trade it all.
Right.
They would basically crash the whole of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Because I think it was over 1 million. It was about 1 million.
It was a lot of Bitcoin, which the irony is, at the time, it wasn't worth an enormous amount of money, because this was in the early days when Bitcoin wasn't worth so much. And of course, at its peak, Bitcoin went up to $60,000. So at the peak, it was worth an enormous amount of money. And what was sad for the MtGox investors, people whose Bitcoin was effectively stolen and lost to them, because the fiat value of the Bitcoin has gone up so much, even with the little bit of Bitcoin that sort of the regulators and law enforcement have managed to keep hold of, and some of it's been sold off and so forth. So even with what they've managed to keep hold of and get back, had that been sort of exchanged into fiat value, or had the people who deposited Bitcoin just got that money back in fiat value and government money value, they'd have more money now than they lost, not in Bitcoin terms, but in government money terms. But because of the Japanese legal system, it hasn't worked like that. So there's still ongoing legal battles, and people who invested in MtGox who, where there is Bitcoin to basically sat there, not as much, but there is Bitcoin sat there that they would technically be able to get back because of the legal system and some ongoing court cases. They still haven't got any money back yet.
Yeah, I think you were saying it's about they recovered 1/5 or like 200,000 Bitcoin just because of sheer luck, I think.
Right.
Yeah, you were saying. So do you see these scams and past hacks sort of as the greatest risk for further crypto adoption, do you think?
I like to think that it's not the greatest risk to crypto adoption, because that is one element of it, but the reality is now that there's technology there such as secure custody for crypto and insurance and there's all of these sort of technologies being built for for tracking crypto that's stolen, for custody to make sure it is kept safe, that really one can keep crypto very, very safely now. There's some companies that have been growing that now have these technologies that are actually storing crypto at institutional levels now is safe and secure. So I don't think that the hacks need to be a worry, because if a company wants to go about storing crypto securely, which yes, there's minor setup costs for that, albeit the setup costs for doing so is less than the cost of having it all lost, it can be stored securely. I think there's a few factors. I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding about what crypto is, and I think it's a lot of the market manipulation, the volatility in the space that does, I would argue, more harm than the actual scams.
Yeah, definitely. And we've definitely seen that. And you could say the FUD as well, and how that affects the price. We've seen that sort of halved over the last few months.
Right, because all it needs is one tweet, which can either push the price of crypto up 30% or crash it by 30%. And you're talking about one tweet just wiping billions of dollars off an entire market.
Yeah, and I guess that's what we say. Like, you look at the forex sort of industry. It's sort of I think each day they trade about $4 trillion dollars. Whereas you compare that to crypto, even though the value of sort of Bitcoin and the cryptos at one point, I think it was close to 2 trillion. That's nowhere near sort of the daily trading volumes. Once the volume increases, there's less. Hopefully, these tweets and stuff will have less impact on the value, and then it'll be more stable.
One can hope.
Yeah, exactly. Fingers crossed. Is there more you believe that could be done sort of to prevent these projects taking advantage of investors?
I think that's largely education, and the more people become aware of crypto, aware of how it works. And the thing is, I mean, a lot of the scams, there's been not just an increase in crypto scams, but the last year there's just been an overall increase in scams, in phishing, in cybercrime, and everything. And I think partly because of lockdown, partly because of scammers' technology is getting more sophisticated. But for people to not fall for them, there's a few sort of security measures that one can take with regards to computers and phones and so forth. So it's partly a practical thing, that there are a few steps that people can take to just keep more practically secure, but also the more people can educate themselves just about how scams work, about how crypto works, about how money works, about how technology works, then they'll be less likely to fall for the scams. And maybe anyone that reads the Crypto Wars book will learn how some of the scams operate, and hopefully then be less prone to falling for them. To get in a cheeky plug for the book.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as you said, it's the more people are involved in the community, the more they understand of what to avoid, and hopefully not lose too much money in the process. So if we obviously go back to the book, what is sort of the one message you'd like people to take away from the book?
Buy it, please. No. The one message that for people to take away, I think it's, if there's anything that is too good to be true, it is too good to be true. And the problem in crypto scams, or in any scams, is they will do anything to fool people. There's been celebrities even who have now been arrested or fined for promoting things that turned out to be scams. There's lots of influencers who have ended up promoting scams, and sometimes they go back a week later and say, sorry, oops, I didn't know it was a scam. But that's only after they've led loads of people to falling for them. And scams, because of multi-marketing structures, do target vulnerable people, and do target people who will then sell them to their friends and to their families and so forth. So unfortunately, the only thing one can really say is sort of don't trust anybody. But if you're looking at anything in crypto, always double, triple, quadruple check it, and post questions. And what you've got with the scams is there's often sort of good people in the scammers sort of social media groups who are trying to inform people that they're scams and trying to protect people. And I'm in some of them, and you see people post about these projects, and people will say, don't do it, it's a scam. They get attacked on, and they really sort of get abused sometimes for trying to stop people. And you know, people get so caught up in them. So I would say if there is anybody saying to you, be careful, it's a scam, really heed that, and at least do an awful lot of research into why they're saying that. And I know the problem is that people still say Bitcoin's a scam, which doesn't help. And one of the big problems in space is you've got people saying Bitcoin's a scam, or saying the dollar's a scam, or saying this is a scam, or that is a scam. And, you know, that doesn't help, because then sort of people get desensitized to the word and say, well, you to say that about everything. But I would say just do an awful lot of research, and don't trust things just because it's somebody that you know or recognize who's promoting it.
Yeah, definitely. And as you said, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And you know, I think another thing you mentioned as well is the FOMO. People are very much, you know, they have a fear of missing out, and fear of missing out on the profits. And if they've missed out on something in the past, maybe they're, you know, they might think, oh, I don't want to miss out this time.
Yeah.
But you'd say just, you know, research it, be patient, and don't
just be slow. It's easy to get excited about the potential gains, but then, you know, equally for everybody that makes some money, there's probably at least a few that have lost money.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so thank you so much for the interview. But I can also see in the background you sort of have the Crypto Currier Club, which you are the founder of. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, so the Crypto Currier Club, it's the main crypto community in the UK. So we, until lockdown, we hosted in-person events over food, over curry and drinks for the crypto community to get together and talk and network and learn. So they were great and super fun events. We've now got a weekly newsletter, the Crypto Currier, that goes out every Friday, just giving the sort of main updates of what happens in crypto and blockchain in the news that week. We've got an industry publication, Blockchain Industry Review, that goes out once a month with deep dive features and interviews of what's really going on in the space, and have a series of virtual events as well, and a fantastic crypto community. So
perfect. And they hopefully they can come back soon, the in-person events. Are they mainly
hopefully.
in London, or are they all around the UK?
They were in London and some other cities in the UK, and the main tech hubs in the UK.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so obviously
there was talk about bringing them internationally before lockdown, but I think we'll start back with London and see what happens when the world slowly reopens.
See how it goes from there. Yeah, perfect. I'll put a link to the book in the description, as well as Crypto Currier Club as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
So yeah, no, thank you so much for joining as well. And yeah, all the best with the book.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thanks. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.